as we here in the Philadelphia region and all the Ben Simmons trade stuff, it's so hard to watch what Giannis does and doesn't do and not think of Ben Simmons. So I want to get Michael's insight on this story about Giannis not being scared and that part of being what makes him great. And if he sees the parallels of what happens to a guy like Ben Simmons, is that's what holding him back. But first, let's bring Michael in and kind of, dive a little deeper into this story because, Michael, it looked like back in the Brooklyn series that you're looking at what happened with Giannis, and it's like his the offensive limitations was going to hold them back. How was he able to overcome these things and lead this Bucks team to where they are now?
He's just relentless. I mean, that's the thing is you got to have grit. There's you can have all the talent in the world, you can have all the ability, but if you don't have a determination and a will to just keep going, you're going to fail. And but you're going to fail miserably. The thing about Giannis is that he's not afraid to fail. And any great player, anybody that's ever achieved something knows that you're going to take some lumps. You're going to come up short. But you got to be willing to go through that and also have the confidence that you will and put in the work to make sure that it doesn't happen again. I don't think that there's anybody we can go through. We can talk about Michael Jordan being the GOAT, but we can also find numerous last-second shots that he missed, even a couple that he's airballed, but he also knew he could make the next one. And that's the attitude you have to have. And I think a lot of times, you mentioned Ben Simmons, he gets in his own way because he wants to be too cool. He's worried about the aesthetics, how it looks, if it looks pretty. And if it doesn't, he doesn't really go as hard as he can. And I think that's what separates Giannis from a lot of other people is that he knows he's going to fail. He knows he's going to make a mistake, but he also knows he's going to come right back at you. And that eventually you're going to have to either surrender and let him have it or he's going to take it.
Yeah, I know, Michael, that you've been around the Sixers plenty over this Ben Simmons era. Do you watch Ben and see Giannis and wonder why Ben is not more like Giannis? Can he be more like Giannis?
No, I don't. I mean, I see the similarities. I see the ability. I see the skill set. And I see that, he's definitely somebody who has immense talent. But, I always feel like Ben is probably too aware. He's too conscious of how he's perceived. He really wants to look the part. And sometimes being the part is a little tougher. And I think that, I don't know where that comes from, but I always felt like the reason why he didn't shoot threes, the reason why he doesn't, really shoot jumpers or free throws well is because he's afraid of how it's going to look. He's afraid of the appearances. He's afraid of the fact people will judge his form, that people will say he's got to do this, this, and that. And he doesn't want that. So what he'd rather do is make plays for others. He'd rather get a setup Tobias Harris for a jumper because he has a better-looking jumper. He'd rather get Joel Embiid in the post because he's more effective in the post. He always feels like the better option is somebody else taking a shot than him. But if he's really going to be on a Giannis level, like an MVP-type player, he's got to get past that. And I've said that for years. I said until he gets past that, until he gets past how everything looks and the perception and trying to be cool all the time, he's gonna come up short.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that happen over and over again in the playoffs.
Yeah, Michael, without asking you to psychoanalyze these guys' backgrounds, but is there something in Giannis's background that Ben's background that make them mentally different, that Giannis says, I don't care what you think of the way my shot looks or how ugly it is or how bad I miss, and where Ben says, that does concern me?
Yeah, it's hard to kind of get into that. I just say from what I know about their backstories, the fact that Giannis is the child of Nigerian immigrants who were undocumented in Greece and they had to hustle and scrap for everything that they got. I think that comes a mentality that you have to have it. Like, you have to go get it, and there's nothing that's going to stand in your way. You can sort of see the way he approaches basketball is probably the same way he approached life. Ben is a bit of a prodigy. He's somebody that's been anointed as the best player, from the time he left Australia to come to play in the United States for high school and for college. He's always been that guy. He's been the number one pick. He's been the top prospect. So I think in his mind, he's like, what am I doing wrong if everybody's telling me I'm great? I'm already a max player. I'm already, considered, an all-NBA player, and my game isn't even polished yet. So why would I work on that? if I'm already this good?
Right.
And I think that they have a different approach because of how they come up. I mean, Giannis was the 15th overall pick, and at the time, people didn't know who he was and never heard of him. Ben was a top player from the minute he stepped foot on American soil, and he sort of hasn't really tried to get better because no one's told him he had to.
It's a great point. And in the story, Michael, you do compare, you say, Ben shrank when the noise got louder about his free throws. How has Giannis been able to kind of, overcome his limitations at the free throw line? And they're counting at him. How has he been kind of be able to push through to the other night? I mean, he shot almost 80% from the line. And it wasn't like he was 8 for 10. I mean, they were putting him at the line, and he's making them.
He's 13 for 17, but his team needs that from him. His team needs all that he can give them, and if he's not aggressive, he's not assertive, then the Bucks are going to lose. And I think he understands his responsibility to make that team better, and that means that he has to attack the basket. That's what he's best at. He might get fouled, but he might not get fouled. They might get out of the way and let him dunk. But if he's not driving, if he's not going downhill, and he's out there shooting threes, then he's bailing the defense out. So he's basically got to go out there and be who he is. And without fear, because he doesn't have an alternative. If he goes out there and tries to be Kevin Durant for a game, it's going to look terrible. It's going to be a lot of brick threes, and it's going to be a lot of fadeaway misses and some air balls every now and then, and it won't be pretty. But if he attacks the rim and gets to the foul line, he opens up the floor in so many ways for everybody else, because they know that the Suns know he's coming, and they know if he's aggressive and flashing, then they got to collapse, and they got to put attention to him. That means Chris Middleton gets an open look. That means Drew Holiday gets an open look. That means PJ Tucker gets wide open in the corner. So he understands that his responsibility to the Bucks is to always be on and to always be aggressive. And I think that people talk about his shortcomings and what he can't do, but I think that what skill set he doesn't have, like he doesn't have a bag like KD or whatever. But he has the ultimate skill. He has the skill that will make any player great. And that is that he goes hard all the time.
Yeah.
Not once in a while, not every time he feels like it, but every possession on both ends of the floor, he gives you everything he has. And that is a skill. And that is a skill that needs to be envied. And that's a skill that needs to be sort of celebrated about Giannis when people talk about him. Yeah, he doesn't have the most fluid jumper, but he goes hard. And you can't really deny a guy that's going to keep attacking.
Yeah, it's so interesting because when they lose, it's almost like those limitations are what hold them back. But he adds, it's like it fuels him to somehow overcome it, even though the limitations are there. And it's something that no coach or nobody can really get out of you. You have to have that kind of innate in you, right?
Yeah, I mean, every now and then you can sort of see that there are moments where it does get overwhelming. I think that he had to take himself out of Game 3 and and kind of tapped out and just had to check out because it kind of took over for him. But his brother's there. His brother's always there to kind of whisper in his ear and say things. It's a unique situation that his brother's his teammate. His older brother is his teammate, and he can always say the right thing to get him centered. I was thinking about Game 7 against the Nets, and he was struggling a little bit. He was having a rough outing. He shot an air ball free throw in Game 7, and everyone was laughing at him and mocking him. And he sort of felt it. And then his brother kind of said something to him late in the game, and there he is hitting the tying basket in overtime over Kevin Durant. So that's the type of thing that you can say about Giannis is that, yeah, he's bionic and he's coming back from, knee injuries and everything. But he is human, too, and every now and then we all need somebody to be in our ear to give us the confidence.
Michael Lee from the Washington Post, at Mr. Michael Lee. It's a great story on what makes Giannis so special and so different. I want to ask you, because obviously you've covered this league for almost 20 years. You've been around the Sixers a lot. I've seen you at the Wells Fargo Center, so you obviously know what's going on with Simmons here. What do you make of the recent murmurs and trade possibilities? Do you think that this is the time, that this is the best time to try to move him, or do you think Daryl Morey will value him enough to keep him here for another try with Joel Embiid?
He was already on the block last season. I mean, he was discussing the James Harden trade, and that's no secret. And I think that that's been in his head for the entire year. It's probably the first time in his career that he hasn't felt, undying commitment from the organization. And he knows that that the ground that he stands on is a little shaky. So I think from the beginning that's part of the reason why he shrunk so badly in the playoffs is because he knows that if he fails, that there's a chance that this could be the end for him. So I think that's always been in the back of his mind. And if you look at Daryl Morey, you look at what he is in terms of just bringing the analytics and elevating that in this game. What does Ben do from an analytical perspective that Daryl Morey is going to love? On the defensive end, yeah, he's great. But in terms of an offensive player, he's not going to space the floor, not going to shoot threes. He's not even going to attack the rim as much as you would want. So I think that he's always in the mind of Morey. I think he's been expendable in some respects. It's just can you get a solid return for him? Has he diminished his value so much from his postseason performance that you can't get what a guy who's 24 years old, who is still an all NBA caliber player, a defensive first team all defense player. Can you get a return for him that warrants that, especially when he's locked in under contract for the next 4 years? And I think that's what they have to pursue is trying to get an all-star level player in return, because teams are going to try to get him on the low, even though he's still an excellent player. He has his flaws, he has his shortcomings, but I just don't know if he ever really fit into how Morey has traditionally built teams. You could say like he had a Shane Battier, who was a great defensive player, but he wasn't the guy who had the ball in his hands. He was just the guy that was a lockdown defender. If the ball's going to be in his hands, he has to do more to help them on the offensive end, and he has to be a guy who's willing to take the shots. If he's not taking shots and he's not setting screens and doing everything else that he needs to do to open up the floor for guys, then what value is it if he plays point guard? The only way I can see him staying is if they get no return and try to add a Kyle Lowry to the mix and just put the ball in Lowry's hands and let Ben Simmons be their power forward, and then maybe they can find something. But if Ben's insisting on being the point guard, then I think that the Sixers have to do what they can to try to find him a new home.
Michael, obviously, Ben has been in the league, and people have been waiting. You just wrote this great piece on Giannis and his inner fire. Is there anything you have seen that suggests to you that Ben Simmons will work on his skill set as it's being suggested and will come back a player that is different from the one we've seen over his first 3-4 seasons?
I don't see it happening unless he's moved and he has to, reestablish himself with another community. I think that if he's still in Philadelphia, I don't know if the coaches here are going to be able to convince him that he needs to do more than he already has. And I think that's sort of been the problem from the beginning. That was a criticism and why they got rid of Brett Brown, is that he wasn't hard enough on Ben and demanding him to do more. He would always say things in the media like, I'm asking Ben to take more shots and I want you guys to mention it. But Ben wasn't really respecting that approach. And then Doc Rivers comes and he already knows the personnel. He has to know what their limitations are. But he didn't seem to demand that of Ben either. And so if nobody's ever going to ask him to be more of what he is, then when the light ever going to go off? I don't think it will here. So if he's moved, he'll probably wind up with a coach who's going to say, Ben, we need this from you. And I think he'll put in the work. But I think one of the main problems that the Sixers have had over the years is that Ben has such a tight circle. He keeps everything, with his family and with his really, really close friends. So he's not really trying to get outside help when it comes to his game. And if he's not going to do that, then how is he ever going to grow? Somebody's got to get in his ear and say that. So far, nobody's been willing to do it. And I just don't think it's going to happen in Philadelphia.
Overall, you see them keeping or moving Ben Simmons this offseason?
Yeah, like I said, it just depends on what kind of package they get in return. I don't think they're in a desperate position where they have to move him. But I think that if they do keep him, then the objective will be to find somebody else to run the team. And I think that'll be something that he'll have to adjust with. And if he can't deal with that, then I'm sure he'll force their hand and make them do something. But I think that unless they're going to have to get a trade of value, for a 24-year-old, 6'10", all defensive player, all NBA caliber player. He's not a scrub. He's just not, an MVP candidate just yet. If he decides to commit himself to working hard and developing the aspect of the game that he just refuses to do for the last couple of years, I think he could really become a truly special player. But right now, he's just not there.
Michael Lee, check out his piece over at the Washington Post on Giannis Antetokounmpo. Says he isn't scared of missing shots. It's part of what makes him great. It's a fantastic read and closer look at Giannis and this Bucks team, 2-1. Where does this series head, Michael?
Tonight's going to be the swing game. I picked the Bucks to win the series. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think if it is going to happen, tonight has to be a must-win for them. And so I would expect that both teams really want to come out and play well. I know, Devin Booker's got to have a better performance than he had the other night. He's really been struggling from the field. They sort of had an answer for him. But I think that if Giannis keeps playing the way he's playing, the Bucks really have a chance of turning the tide and tying this up.
That's tonight right here on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him at Mr. Michael Lee and check out his column in the Washington Post. It's a fantastic look at Giannis Antetokounmpo. Michael, we appreciate the time, pal.
Hey, thanks for having me on anytime. I appreciate it.
All right, Michael Lee here on the Sports Bash. An excellent piece, an inner look at Giannis Antetokounmpo, and it's a great kind of parallel to what we see with Ben Simmons. But I think Michael really breaks it down beautifully in terms of the inner fire that Giannis has is something that Ben Simmons lacked.